the Gospel. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as one of their scribes. Here ends the readings of the word for this day. May all who have heard them ponder them and keep them for the living of our own lives. Amen. I've had many teachers in my life. Some have won international prizes for peace and justice. Some have published best-selling novels. Some have earned a PhD degree from Harvard University. But the two teachers who have contributed perhaps the most to my being a human being and being a person of faith are the woman of Zarephath and Walter Buckingham. These two have taught me essentially the same thing. When you open your home and your life and your heart to the stranger, or to the one down on his luck, or to the one who can't possibly return the favor, you are opening yourself to all that is holy. The widow of Zarephath lived at a time of drought. Today we would call it a financial recession. She had literally come to the last measure of flour, the last measure of oil. The cupboard was bare. There's a knock on the door. A stranger asks for a loaf of bread. Knowing it is the last food remaining for her and her son, she invites the stranger in, serves in the bread that she had imagined for her and her family, and then she just prepares to die because there's nothing left in the house. When she returns to the kitchen, lo and behold, the canister of flour is not empty, and there's still oil in the jar. There is enough for another day. Indeed, she discovers there is enough for every day thereafter. What this widow woman knows is that whenever hospitality is offered, whenever the bread is shared, whenever the risk is taken, whenever compassion is the trump card, there is always enough. There's always enough. This simple truth, I know, defies mathematical logic. There is nothing reasonable about it. It is a matter of faith. She and Walter Buckingham were cut from the same cloth. They lived by the same ethic. They were sustained by the same theology. When you share what you have, there's always enough. Walter and Anne. Anne and Walter. Walter and Anne. It's hard to say one without the other. Walter and Anne consistently gave away the last of their bread, the last of their oil. Consistently said, one more, come on, we'll set another place at the table. And And consistently they bore witness to God's truth. That there's always enough when hospitality is offered, especially to those who could never return it. There was a time, and Nils referred to this very passage, great minds work together. There was a time when Jesus told his disciples that whenever they visited somebody in prison, they were actually visiting him. Now, Walter believed that. When he was visiting that tippy guy, he was visiting Jesus. Jesus told the disciples whenever they welcomed a traveler into their homes, they were actually welcoming him. Now, Walter and Ann actually believed that and lived that. He told his friends that whenever they fed somebody who was hungry or gave drink to somebody who was thirsty, they were actually satisfying him. Walter actually believed that. That was the secret to his abundance. His abundance was not about accumulating stuff. His abundance was about sharing whatever he had with the least of God's children. Walter's encounters with the holy were among the men and women and youth who were least able to affirm themselves. The ones who were least able to love themselves. The ones who were least able to believe in themselves. His encounters with Christ were out in the trenches, in the prison cells, in those places where life is raw. Walter was my teacher. He taught me to find the sacred not in a bejeweled altar, but in the presence of a human being who had lost his way. In the presence of a human being who needed a friend, a non-judging friend. There are about 100,000 ways to eulogize this dear man. One image that will remain forever with me is the image of Walter singing up there in the choir in the tenor section, singing a familiar anthem, his face just glowing, just glowing. His face would glow. His body sway, just sway up there. He was just living that anthem. His whole everything alive to the joy of being a servant in the service of the whole human family. Now, I've quietly been wondering how this church is going to survive with the loss of Walter Buckingham. How are we going to survive here? Who will welcome the visitors? Who will come every Sunday with a name tag on? Walter had that way of walking right up to a first-time visitor and just drawing that person into the warmth of the community. Who will fill that gap in the tenor section? It's not just that his voice is missing, but that unbridled joy. The unbridled joy, that's what will be missing. You couldn't watch Walter sing and not be changed. That guy knows something. I want to know what it is he knows. Who will tithe their income? There, I've outed you, Ann, as a tither. Who will tithe their income? Ann and Walter gave to the church the first fruits of their labors. They didn't give out of the leftovers. They gave the first 10% of their income. They were tithers. Who will visit the sick and the lonely? When it was Walter ringing your doorbell, you knew a light had come to your darkness. I've been wondering how we're going to be church without him. And then I thought, hold on. Walter has been our teacher. He has taught all of us well. He has shown us what God requires, such that we'll carry on somehow, because he has taught us what God requires: to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with God. Thank you, Walter Buckingham, for having been our teacher. We're going to keep on being the Church of Jesus Christ here on the corner of Main and High Streets, because you have taught us so well. Well done, good and faithful servant. I remain in the greatest of hope. Amen.